Jason, I am back from South Africa. It's nice to see you.
Welcome home. It's good to see you too. I hope you had a great trip, Garth.
We did. It was it's a pretty exceptional place. But anyway, we can do a whole different podcast on that. Jason, I have a question for you. We're going to go back to the characters of Ted Lasso. Rupert Mannion. Ethical, unethical, or just mean-spirited? What do you think?
I'm not a fan of this character. I know we did a draft of characters at one point, and I think he went very low on the list. I think he's unethical, and I think he's mean-spirited, and I think he's an archetype of a lot of what we see in kind of traditional leadership roles that may have existed in ages that have gone by. And so I just there's something about him that makes me feel that he would do whatever it took to move his business ahead and would not consider the impact on others. Seems to me self-sustaining and self-involved as opposed to being ethical and inspired. What about you? Where do you land on the Rupert argument?
Yeah, in the draft, someone was like, should I give him to someone or should I just take him? But he is a great foil to Ted, right? Mm-hmm. He's a great foil. He operates in his own value system, which is super, super interesting. And can you be ethical in different value systems is a great question. It's something that we address on this pod, and it's why I'm wearing the toque I'm wearing.
I know, that's a great product placement, Garth. Patagonia, we talk about sleeping at night. We also talk about some interesting podcasts we want to listen to, and books and articles, and have a great conversation about how do we get involved in principled leadership. And I think this is a banger. I think people are really going to enjoy this ethical leadership and decision-making podcast.
It's a banger of a podcast, everybody. Enjoy.
Enjoy the show.
With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's Field to your day-to-day. Last Sowing Leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow.
Hey, welcome back to Last Sowing Leadership, everybody. My name is Garth Nichols.
And I'm Jason Rogers. And today, Garth, we are exploring a cornerstone of effective leadership, and it is ethical decision making.
Yeah, I think it's something we are all interested in, Jason, particularly in this climate these days. So why don't we start off with a brief definition. So ethical leadership is about more than just making right choices. It's about embodying values that inspire trust and integrity with our teams. And, as a school leader, Jason, I recently have been researching, how do you make ethical decisions, and how do you, get support for making these critical types of choices in your role. So I recently looked into some Indigenous perspectives on ethics, and they do offer, as I always say, profound insights that really enrich our understanding of what it means to lead ethically and have or try to embody ethical leadership.
That's cool, Garth. I mean, this is an area where I think we can all continue to learn. It seems like a lifetime of learning. And I love that you bring this forward on this podcast. I'm super curious, what have you learned, or what's stuck with you in your exploration?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's a book I'm reading right now. I think I mentioned it last podcast, called How to Do Nothing.
Garth, I'm in love with this book, just so you know. This is unbelievable. I hope we get the author on this show at one point.
Jenny Odell, can't emphasize enough. She actually talks a lot about Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing. Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass and others. But one resource that really resonated with me is the guide from British Columbia, and it's titled Pulling Together, a Guide for Researchers. Hikala, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And it emphasizes that Indigenous ethics are deeply rooted in values such as honor, trust, honesty, humility. And these are some of the seven sacred teachings that we learn about in Ontario and certainly shared across many Indigenous communities. And so these values reflect a commitment to a collective, They embody a respectful relationship with one another, but also with land and community. This idea of, understanding the decisions we make now will have impacts way further down the line. So ethical thinking in Indigenous cultures often begins at birth through storytelling, which guides behavior, instills a sense of belonging, shared values, responsibility to the family, to the larger world. And this approach underscores the importance of community and the interconnectedness of our actions and the importance of storytelling to instilling ethics. And so when you know that you are centered and the decisions you make are networked, like the impact of those decisions are networked, you have to try and take in as many different perspectives and as many different possible outcomes as you can. And I think that's a really important part of ethical decision making.
Wow, we could just end the podcast right there, Garth. That was really good. I think, you come back to, you said some things off the top of your monologue there about like honor, trust, honesty, and humility. Like, aren't those just generally the underpinnings of great leadership and characteristics of great leaders? I think that's it. Everything you said was so true. I hope listeners rewind that bit and bring it back to the forefront and remind themselves of what's truly important in leadership. And I mean, it all challenges us to think beyond our individual success and consider the broader impact of our decisions. Like you said, Garth, community, right? This is about interconnectedness and community. And ultimately being able to see that is leadership. And I think that all lays into ethical leadership and decision-making quite well. And this is a mindset that can be cultivated early and reinforced often. Leadership is sometimes about making hard decisions. That's just a fact of it all. And trying to make sure that you are not a lone wolf in these decisions. But really, the buck stops with the leader. And when the decisions are made, that's just the reality of leadership.
Yeah, and it got me thinking about, your leadership, your one of your approaches to leadership, which is servant leadership, and also collaborative leadership. Making an ethical decision generally rarely happens on its own. There are also situations that involve ethics in decision making too. So I'd like to make that distinction as well, because sometimes as a leader, you have to make hard decisions that you can't share with others because of confidentiality, legality, whatever. That's a real part of being a leader. So Jason, can you share an example of an ethical decision you faced in your leadership journey?
Well, I think what might be more helpful, Garth, instead of getting into specific decisions, talking about a couple principles that guide me in ethical decision making. Because I think more importantly than specific decisions, you've got to have this broader principled approach to really hit the mark. So the first thing I would say is, and it's simple, but as we're making these decisions, I think at the end of the day, we have to be able to sleep at night as leaders. So you've got to grapple with this to the point where you know that you're doing good and with integrity. And at the end of the day, generations perhaps will look back and say, that leader made the best decision that they could with the information they had in the time, in the most appropriate way. And I think if you do that as a leader, yes, you are going to be able to sleep at night. And I think that's a really big part of it. And I think second to that, as much as that's a general principle in leadership, I think you've got to come up with your own leadership principles so that they can guide you. And I mean, one of the things I said when I took on headship was I value people over things. So I really want to invest in people in our organizations in ways that are appropriate to support them in doing their best work. And so if you've got that, you can lean back on that and say, remember, I'm making this decision. It's people over things. Or one of our values or inside our mission here at Rundle is to celebrate with them when they do. And so if we have a choice to celebrate or not celebrate, so if we have to make a decision about do 2 students get student of the year, do just 1 student get student of the year, we can't make this decision. We'll just put it on the table and say, hey, listen, we choose to celebrate over not celebrating. So that means we're going to celebrate both of these students who have earned this honor. We're not going to be, principled in the fact that only one kid has ever gotten this. We're choosing to celebrate. We're not choosing to exclude. So I think having principles is probably more important than, really deeply exploring the decisions that you make.
Jason, I appreciate your principled approach to leadership. And when you were talking about sleeping at night, I think one of the things that, and we've talked about this in our podcast before, one of the ethical decisions that we have to sometimes grapple with is exiting someone from our organization. It could be a student, it could be a faculty member. And there are implications in that. And I think I think our listeners would appreciate this. Just like, let's you and I just banter back and forth on this. You have a student who, is unfortunately going to be leaving your, like, you have the decision whether or not they leave your institution, and you have to balance these decisions. And sometimes families or individuals might be thinking just in the short term, right? Not being able to see how the choice that unfortunately you have to make for someone else, for a family or for a student, might actually be the best decision for them long term. Because that's just one example that I heard you talking about in these principles, a long term impact. And you've got these principles celebrating people over things, and choose to celebrate, not celebrate. But when it comes to hard decisions, like having to exit people from your organization, what are some principles you lean on to help you do that, to help you sleep at night?
I think you hit it on the head, Garth, whether you knew it or not. But I think long-term decisions are not made quickly. I think that's one of the things that we think about is if we're talking about, say, for instance, a student who's not succeeding in our program, we owe it to that family to be a part of the journey, be a part of that community, and be humble in the approach and seek first to understand and help them come to understand our position over time as well. And so whenever possible, we try to make long-term decisions in a patient way that takes time, right? And I think it comes back to being human or showing humanity in these decisions. And I think working with people to really understand their position, empathize, is the first step. And I think that's something we hold dear. I think, and also understanding why the decision might be leaning in that direction will take a long time to come to know. So I think, really having patience, I think being contemplative, being empathetic, being humble, I think these are all critically important when it comes to ethical decision-making. And I think that's how we would approach any of these situations and always do. And at the end of the day, I think you win if everybody wins. I think that's the bottom line. I think that's a tried and true principle. You win if everybody wins. And how do we get everybody to a win is a big part of it. What about you, Garth? Where's that sit with you?
I appreciate what you were saying there. And I think one of the critical things about this, and you touched on it, is take time. And sometimes we don't have a lot of it, but you need to take time. The toughest decisions deserve the time for you to think out the impacts, talking earlier about that interconnection of the impact of decisions, and being really comfortable by saying, in my experience and my expertise, this is the right decision for this family. And I think that's another thing. I think it's another thing why Ted Lasso was so popular, because he's making ethical decisions and we're watching it play out in real time. Do you have a particular episode or scenario about Ted Lasso that comes up with ethical decisions?
How could we not, Garth? I think you and I'd probably draw the same one out. Like, brings to mind moment in the series Ted Lasso. In the episode, Do the Rightest Thing. Sam, one of the players, learns that the team sponsor, Dubai Air, is owned by a company responsible for environmental damage in his home country of Nigeria. Faced with this ethical dilemma, Sam, and you notice in the show, he sits with it. Like, we're talking about patience here, Garth. I think, and sometimes that's part of it. He sits with it, and he chooses to cover the sponsor's logo on his jersey during the match, taking a stand against the wrongdoing. His teammates recognize that he's deeply contemplated this and the importance of his stance, and they join him in solidarity. This act of courage and integrity, and I think any kind of ethical decision-making is likely going to take courage somewhere along the way, not only highlights individual ethical decision-making, but also the support that ethical leadership can inspire. And we see this with the whole team. Really amazing.
Yeah, I love that because, again, Jamie Tart, he's the first one to back up Sam in that example. But there's, I think, two things that you've drawn out in the example that deserve touching on. And one is he contemplated for a while, and he actually went to his dad. He had a conversation with his dad. And I think mentorship, making decisions not alone, but with some really good counsel, is critical. And in that mentorship, his dad just asked him questions about who he wanted to be. And I think it was just like such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing. And that in the end, Sam knew he would have the backing of the administration. And if he didn't, then he was willing to leave based on that decision. So standing up to those for those principles, standing up against others who share different principles, I think is really powerful. And of course, there's another moment where, and we mentioned this with Bart, our conversations with Bart, where Ted delivers a speech in Le Locker Room au Fort during halftime in a match. You were talking about Colin and Isaac and how they're really struggling. Colin reveals his sexuality to the team. The team initially responds by saying they don't care, but then Ted shares that story about a childhood friend and just flips the script about we don't care, because in fact, they do care deeply about him as a person, so much so that they don't care about what other people think. I think this is an ethical decision by Ted to reframe support, and I think it, in the end, had really profound impact on the team.
Man, I totally believe it, and I think throughout, Ted lives in this spot of, how do I be the most ethical leader I can be? Like, I think, we've been debating our last episode, whether Ted was a great leader or just a great person. And I think that sticks with me. It kind of, I think he's a great leader. And I do think he, that fact, when he steps up and says, we do care, that's a moment. Like that's signaling to the group that everybody is really important and it is worthwhile caring. And I think ethical leadership is about setting that example, right? And creating a culture where integrity and respect are paramount. It's about fostering environments where team members feel empowered to act according to their own values and are accepted for that.
Yeah. And as we talked about, I would say, and communicating those values, like Bart was saying, is lack of communication. And maybe we'll get some listener questions on this, because when making decisions as a leader of an organization, you should try whenever possible. This is our mission, vision, values, and this is how this decision that we're making is moving towards our mission, vision, values. Just try to be as transparent as possible when you can. So listeners, if you have questions about when you can and shouldn't, I mean, those are great. And I just love, Jason, how all of our themes are slowly tying together as we wrap up our second season of the podcast.
Oh, Garth, I think this is a complete masterclass in leadership, and I'm looking forward to being able to share this more widely, whether it's in writing or in presentations. And I think all of these pieces come together to support strong leadership, and that's also so well said. So as we wrap up today's discussion, Garth, let's encourage our listeners to reflect on their own leadership practices, consider the values that guide their decisions, the principles which they hold dear, and how they impact their team and their community. I think that's a great leadership challenge.
Yeah, and the practice of reflecting on decisions, I think, can be really helpful here. But Jason, it's about continuous learning. So what can you share for us to learn more about ethical leadership?
Yeah, just a couple quick items here. The Rise of Ethical Leadership in Modern Business Enterprises by Kalina Terziva. I'm never good at last names, but you get the point if you look it up, and we'll have it in the show notes. In this article, she writes, understanding the implications of your decisions. Your decisions have consequences, not just for your business, but also for everyone involved in it. Consider how each decision will affect all the stakeholders before making final choices. And I think that is absolutely critical in 100%. This sense that, it is about a person, but it's also about an organization. It's about a business. It's about a community. It's about everybody who surrounds it. And that is leadership, my friend. I think that's everything that we need to do in leadership. Also, Garth, we both just finished the book Unreasonable Leadership. We'll be doing a podcast season 3 on this
hospitality.
one.
Unreasonable hospitality.
Sorry, Unreasonable Hospitality. And in this book, one of the things that really stuck with me is the author says the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. And I think that is principled and ethical leadership to its core. If you're going to do it one way, you're going to do it that way for many, many things. And people have to look to you with trust. That's pretty darn important. What about you, Garth? You've always got something in your back pocket.
Yeah, for me, I love the case study of Patagonia as a clothing company. I think it's a North Star for ethical leadership.
Cool.
So I'll recommend a podcast. It's called Lead with That. And the title of this one is What Patagonia Can Teach Us About Ethical Leadership from the Center for Creative Leadership. And in this podcast, they talk about the company's actions. One of the hosts says, can you be a sustainable country that is ethical within a capitalist environment? I don't know the answer to that, but it's worth considering. We probably won't know that answer today, and that's all right. But we can make some strides. So you can exist in that system, that having a goal of being ethical and sustainable might be counterintuitive to the system. That's a big question. And the rest of the pod explores the actions of Patagonia through that ethical lens, and it's amazing. Put on my Patagonia hat there just for effect. There you go.
Well, I think it's product placement. Maybe we'll get a little sponsorship out of this, Garth. I appreciate that.
Oh my gosh. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Last Sowing Leadership. If you have questions or topics you'd like us to explore, feel free to reach out at lastsowingleadership@gmail.com. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Spotify, Instagram, etc. And Jason?
Thanks for listening. Thanks for following. Thanks for coming along. And to everybody who's out there, keep leading the Lasso way. Thanks, Garth.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Step up to the mic. It's time to play Last Sowing Leadership.
Hey, Garth, this doesn't happen very often, but we forgot something in the podcast.
I'm going to blame it on my severe jet lag while we're recording.
I got nothing to blame it on. But Garth, let's make right on this. Who's our guest that's coming in?
We have an amazing guest coming up. A good friend, a former colleague at Havergal College, Vanessa Wade, is going to be joining us. And I got to know Vanessa in many different ways at Havergal. She's been like a stalwart in terms of providing an ethical sort of North Star for our students. And now she's on the East Coast with her family, working at an incredible school. We'll hear much more about that. But you will want to tune in next week to hear from my good friend and former colleague, Vanessa Wade. It's a great podcast.
And like this podcast, Garth, they should tune in and they should stay tuned in because we break a record on the podcast. We have 2 outros, not 1, not 0. So stay tuned on Vanessa's podcast. Don't hang up when the music comes on. We got a couple more segments.
Ones. Yeah,
it's one of our longer ones. Very, very good. I can't wait for it. Thanks for jumping back on, Garth.
All right, keep leading the Lasso way. Bye.
Step up to the mic. It's time to play Last Sowing Leadership. Every day from the pitch to the boardroom, lessons call to mind. Keep leading the lasso way. You'll find we've got heart, we've got soul, and humor too. Exploring how Ted shows what leaders should do. With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's field to your day-to-day. Last Sowing Leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn.